Right now we have a young lady. We call her Ronnie, but her name is Veronica Jackson, and she's been very much a part of this whole process of the church on Schaefer, Puritan, and beyond. And she's here to stick and stay and do whatever we have to do. Her and her mother and her father are very much pillars of the church. Her mother's the only one who put me to work right away, had me come over and start working in her house, start painting. She would make you an entrepreneur. She has something for everybody to do. Veronica, talk to us.
I like to say that everybody knows Ella Mae Jackson. Ella Mae Jackson was a pillar, and she knew how to get things started. I remember on Trumbull, when we had the baseball stadium down the street, she used the church parking lot to park cars and sandwiches. And then as we grew, we went to different part of the Detroit and Leland, and she had the cooks, Mother Jackson, Mother Bivens, and Mother Holland, Sister Holland. And then when we went over to Puritan, that's when we really started growing. And she was the one that wrote a letter to David Lee Ellis. At that time, he was Elder Ellis. And she wrote a letter and asked him, would you consider pastoring our church? He didn't know how it was, but when you know, just a few people there. So he decided to come and try out. There's different ones that tried out, and we didn't accept them. See, I was young then, so I didn't know what really was going on. But you could hear the people saying, well, he's too young, he's too this. But as you grow to love him, everybody accepted him. And she started having, I remember on Saturdays, she had rummage sales at different stores. She rented out the store and had rummage sales and collected all the money and brought it back to the church.
Bishop David Ellis was 26 then, wasn't he?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, he was. And he was young. And I can remember at the church let out, we had to get him to the train station. And, you know, at that time, the speed limit. Anyway. And so we picked him up from the train station, dropped him off from the train station. And so when he decided to be the pastor, she picked him up at the Y. We go down the boulevard, turn that corner. He's standing right there waiting on us. And he didn't trust nobody driving, but she knew how to drive. And so it's different things that happen. And as the church grew, we had ushers and deacons, you know, everything started growing. Oh, you want to get, and so I'm sorry. And so my father was there. They had barbecue dinners on Saturdays and different things outside of the church on Puritan. They had different functions. I know the first baby shower we had, and we had the plays. Different people had different ideas coming into the church, and the church started growing. And when they had the opening of all the windows, I think the whole neighborhood was disturbed because you could hear them singing and shouting, and you could look out the window and see buses stopping just to hear the church, the choir sing. And at that time, it was the radio choir, and it was a small choir, but it was the radio choir. And I was among the radio choir, and we went to different cities, and we was like a small church with a loud voice. And so we had, everybody wanted the radio choir to sing. At that time, we had Maddie Moss Clark to come and rehearse with us, even though she threw books at us. But she brought us out. She brought us out of the voices of singing. And then you can remember Shirley. Shirley was the singing soul of her life. You know, she could sing any song. And so it was different ones that helped boost the church. And I really appreciated Deacon Kite doing this, because sometimes we forget where we came from. And I know the old saying said, don't burn the bridge where you came across, because you might have to go back on that bridge. And so I appreciate my mother and my father who stood there and did everything. And so it's just a joy to take this time and pleasure in speaking of my mother and father. Thank you.
May, I want to say something too about this young lady. Her mother and father was somebody in the church that she stated, but I was saved in 1952, and when I came in, her father was about one of the only deacons along with Carrie Matthews, and right away, if anybody ever knowed anything or knowed how to do anything, her daddy was one of them, and her mother. They both run the church just about at that time, and there were two great people. I learned a lot through Wilbur Jackson, and Ronnie was just a little girl, all right, but I got changed. I can never forget the time he always drove the Cadillac.
New car.
A new car. My late wife and I was good. Her mother was a good friend of hers, and we always had a seat because I was added to the deacon board and sat with Wilbur Jackson going off. And like she said, after our church was the late Bishop Edison Farber and had decided that the Lord had called him back to Miami, and we was all shook up but didn't many folk, her mother knew this young man in Chicago named David Ellis, and I knew him too because I got a chance to ride with him. But most of the older saints did not know him, and they thought he was too young. And so, but she wrote, and he won the vote. Like we said, we had 3 people that we voted on, but he was the most popular one.
Who were the 3?
Who was Isaac River and Hoodie Hope. Well,
Okay.
those were the 3 we voted on, and but David Ellis won the popular vote,
Right.
and so he came to us in that 1952, and as that's one of the old statements of our church. He stood among about 35, 40 or 50, people at that time saying, "Don't worry, God gonna send us help that we know nothing about." And little that thing came to pass, and we are where we are today because of that.
Right now, I'm going to bring in Joe Claxton, and he's going to tell you his story as only he can tell it. Hey, Joe.
Hey, how you doing, Rico? Good. Well, Rico, I'm going back to 1968 when I came in over on Puritan and Dexter, February 18th, 1968, which this coming February will be 47 years that I have been involved with Grace Temple back then and now Greater Grace Temple. And I remember coming in that cold February morning to a Sunday morning service, and boy, I tell you, I never have been the same since. God filled me with the Holy Ghost that Sunday morning, and the church just went up. And I just thank God for just shedding His grace and His love upon me, sparing me to be saved at a young man, 19 going on 20 years old. And now I'm 67, and I just thank God for the years, because it's only been through God's grace that He's brought me this far.
Is it true what I hear that you had your mom and they had most of the kids in the church at that time?
Yes, yes. I'm from a family, my mother and father, having 17 boys and 2 girls, and most of them all in the church. And back in those days, those lean days, I mean, it was just a blessing to see how God just worked miracles in our family, providing for us.
So that took place, and what duties did you do at the church from that particular point?
Well,
everybody had something to do, because Bishop wouldn't have you sit in the audience. Everybody got busy.
That's true. Let's see, in 1968, I remember I joined the radio choir at that time and sang with them and traveled around various churches in and out of the state, singing and working with that group. And then I also joined at that time it was called the baptismal committee, where we would come and welcome new candidates to come in for baptism and take them back in the back there and help them change clothes and get them ready for baptism. and then coming on over to Schaefer, continue work in that capacity. And I think that time I actually joined we called the male chorus at that time.
Yes.
And we traveled with them and sang with them. So many men just singing in the choir at that time.
Which was started by pastor's wife, Sister Wilma Ellis.
Yes, it sure was. And coming on up later years, when we got over to the cathedral, I had the honor and the privilege of Bishop David Ellis asking me to join the deacon board. And formed in that capacity for a few years, serving him and just working with the Deacon Kite and Rico and other members of the deacon board, and just benefiting from the experience and the longevity that they all had at that time. I remember so many of the former older deacons that would talk to us younger deacons, and we just shared and just reminisce on a lot of that good talk and instructions that they gave us back then.
At that time, we had two brothers on the board, the Howards and the
Yes,
Claxtons.
yes.
Brother David.
Yes, my brother David, who was actually a trustee in the church going way back into the 60s,
Awesome.
being here in 1962 when Bishop came. Actually, my brother David is the reason why I came to Greater Grace, following him and watching him and just wanting to be around him.
Awesome.
Yes, yeah. So now we're in this year, 2015. I'm just so glad to be working in the capacity that I'm doing now, working in the Call of Grace ministry, encouraging and speaking God's words of wisdom to people, to encourage them to just come on and be saved and strengthen those who are saved, to let them know that you can make it.
Tell us about the building that you had across the street from the school.
Oh, yeah.
What was the name of that, and what capacity? What did that do?
Okay, and that was also came about by Bishop David Ellis. He helped me to acquire a building that the church had back at that time in 1996, yes, I believe. And during 1988. And he blessed me to acquire that building. And I had a senior adult daycare business and had that business for 22 years, operating out of that site, providing senior care daycare for elderly persons who should not be left alone home during the daytime. And that was a blessing also.
So many people don't realize all the different entities that the church had. We have a funeral home, we have a school, we have a senior citizen complex,
Yes.
we have a senior daycare business that you had.
Yes.
Greater Grace is ahead of its time.
It truly was. As a matter of fact, our Bishop Charles Ellis used to bring different ministers, used to come in from for various reasons, for meetings and stuff, and even bring them to our facility just to show them what Greater Grace was doing about that time for the community. Greater Grace has always been a church that outreached into the community. That was our dear Bishop David Ellis' dream, was always invite and be a friend to everybody.
That was his motto.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Joe. We appreciate your time.
All right. You're welcome.
All right, here we are back again with Sister Matthews. I'm telling you, this lady and her family, we cannot tell the story without them telling their story, and I'm just going to let her go ahead and start.
Hi, my name is Annie Matthews. I was brought up in the church. I came here when I was 2 years old from Reynolds, Georgia. I stayed with my aunt, me and my mom and dad and my brother, my younger brother. We were brought up in the church on Russell Street. From Russell Street, I think we went to Trumbull under the leadership of Bishop Ellington Forbes. We left Trumbull, and I think we went on the boulevard, in the basement of the boulevard.
See, they didn't know about that.
No, we were in the basement, and the lady rented us the basement. I remember that well, because we used to run around and play, run around the Cunninghams and everything. Veronica, Margie, all of us. Then after the boulevard, we went to Trumbull. After Trumbull, we went to Leland. From Leland, we went to Puritan. From Puritan to Schaefer, from Schaefer here, thank God. My family includes a large portion of Greater Grace. I'm on my father's side and my mother's side. My father was Kerry Matthews, better known as T. He was a deacon. He was a trustee. He worked the candy counter. My mom, she was usher, missionary, and she worked in the kitchen. Everybody knows her as Nettie. She cooked the rolls with Sally.
Hold it there. Let's step right there. She the one who brought the rolls here?
No.
Is she the original person?
She's not the original.
Okay.
My aunt, Eva Matthews.
All right.
That's my aunt. That's my dad's sister. She had the recipe, and she gave it to my mom and Sally. And Sally and my mom started cooking them for the church. But the recipe was originally Eva Matthews. I had an Aunt Eva Matthews and an Aunt Eva Carson. Okay, Eva Carson was my mother's sister. Eva Matthews was my daddy's sister. And that's where the Greens come in my family. Those are first cousins. Sister, what's her name? Elizabeth Carter. That's my mom's niece. So the Carters get in there.
These are some cooking people. Even
Yeah.
today, they still have a feast once or twice a year.
Yes, we do.
I haven't been to one yet, but I've been hearing a lot about it. This might be the year. Tell us about that.
You want to know about my the ones that are in the kitchen? Oh.
Yeah, the feast, how that came about.
Oh, the feast. Well, I don't know. We just keep it as like a family gathering. And like I was telling one of the girls that everybody was cousins. When we grew up, when we went places, it was my cousin Veronica or my cousin Margie. It was just, we were all cousins, just family, because it was a small church and we were just all family. And I loved them just like they were birth cousins. Everybody, you know, we were brought up under love, to love one another, you know. And the feast started, well, we just got together once a year, and not only our family, we invited the Greens, the Carsons, the Carters, not only them, the Spindle, the Hicks, all of us would gather together. Veronica, Margie, Denise, the Spindle, like I said, and then it originated from Georgia Reynolds, because we all came from Georgia.
Okay.
We all came from Georgia. And we just have a picnic every other year when there's not a family reunion going on. And we just gather at the park and have a big picnic.
So was there a specific auxiliary that you worked with?
I grew up in the church with the children's choir and everything. At 17, I started filling my oats and I left. But, you know, with my mom's prayers, my aunts and everybody's prayer, I came back because there was nothing else, you know.
God.
After being out there,
the seed was planted.
The seed was planted. I came back and I'm here. Thank God. Thank God. So we still have our family picnics, and my cousins still come over for breakfast or dinner, whatever they want, because my house is open to them.
Right.
And they know they can come anytime they want.
We thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Memory lane. There are so many things that I can think about as I reminisce and reflect on our beginning, the Glenn family, at Greater Grace Temple. At the time we came in the early 60s, around 63, 64, I very vividly remember going to what I considered to be this big church with this very youthful and dynamic pastor. And as I reflect upon that memory, I remember my mom and my dad, Dr. Helen Glenn and George Glenn Sr., bringing the entire family. And it was during the altar call, and we were accustomed to the altar call and the order of service, but I found it so strange when they said that we were all going to go up after the altar call, and I didn't know why. Well, as it turned out, my mom, my dad, and all of my siblings, all 9 of them, we were becoming members of Bethel Temple, now known as Greater Grace Temple. And so as we lined up, they were applauding that we were such a large family coming on board to this church. It was the best decision that my parents could have made. And this is where we've grown up in church, as well as in our life. Our friendships, our relationships have all been based here. I remember so many faces, the Hickses, the Greens. I happen to marry a Green, and I love that. And I also remember, I don't want to begin to call names, but Deacon Kite has a place in my heart because he was the deacon at the time. And it seemed like he had so much energy, and they were always busily doing what was needed for the upbuilding of the kingdom of God, because we are that kingdom. We are the church. And I'm just delighted that growing up with the Ellis family, with the Greens, the Matthews, the Hicks, and on and on and on, and the Balls, and so many others that I can recall, we had fun because this was where we grew up. This is what we did. We were called church girls in school. We were called, yeah, they go to church. We didn't really know the importance of that at the time, but it has helped to sustain us so that even today we find ourselves at Greater Grace Temple, now pastored by Bishop Charles H. Ellis III, who at the time was just a kid hanging out with us. Little did we know then that he would become our pastor. We are so grateful for the memories, for the junior missionaries, the youth choir, the young ushers, and just everything that we were able to do. This was our training ground. This is where we learned how to speak, how to go before the public, and just how to be honorable people, not just in church, but to let the light that is Jesus Christ shine so that others will know that this is who and what we are about. I love my church, Greater Grace Temple, its people, the pastors, Bishop David Ellis, our current pastor, Bishop Charles Ellis, and all of the family and those that we have been connected with down through the years. God has been good.
This is Deacon Rico here with Sister Mary Woods, another pillar from our past, and she's part of our great presence that we had. She plays such a major role. Only she can tell her story. She's done so much here. I'm just going to let her jump in. And Mary, tell us what you've done in the past and where we are now.
Okay, well, I came to Detroit in 1965. Now, I was saved at Clinton Street, Greater Bethlehem Temple, and that's where all of my family was. But I really always wanted to go to a smaller church. So when I moved here, I decided to go to Grace, or Little Grace as we now call it. And it was truly small. I was impressed because half of the seats were roped off because the congregation was so small. And I totally enjoyed it. And when I went home, I told my grandmother, oh, that's where I'm going to be. And within a matter of weeks, the ropes came off and people came. And after a few weeks, there was something that needed to be typed, because back in those days, everybody we worked as unto the Lord. Nobody expected to be paid. There was no money to be paid. And Elder Raymond Manier said to the pastor, David, why don't you ask Mary to do it? She's a typing teacher. And it's like, okay, I went and typed the letter. And 4 years later, somehow, I was drafted into the position of secretary. And 4 years later, I was still there as secretary. Well, as time went on, during that time, you got involved in other stuff, like I was a founding member of now it's the Guidance and Education Committee, then it was the Scholarship Committee. I never joined the choir because I could not sing, but somehow somebody figured out that I could talk. And I was a part of the original broadcasters, because Sister Glenn, it was only one announcer, and that was Sister Helen Glenn. So when I came, she used to call me her sidekick, and I helped her with that. And then, of course, as we grew and other people came in, the load was lightened. But as I often share the story, my greatest moment was when the church, somebody gave us an IBM Selectric typewriter, and that was wonderful, because before then, we had the really, really old typewriter. And the church had very little money, obviously. And one of the things that we can laugh about now, everybody knew never answer your phone on the first ring, because we had to pay 20 or 25 cents per call. So if your phone rang one time, that meant call the church, and then we wouldn't have to pay for the phone call because we couldn't afford it.
That was a special code.
That was a special code. I would come home from work and my grandmother would say, "Okay, honey, you got to call the church because the phone rang one time." I had her program, never touch it after the first ring, you know.
So many untold stories.
Oh, are there stories? As the saying goes, there are many stories in the city.
We
This
thank
has
you.
only been a few.
Yes. We
Okay.
thank you for your time, Mary.
Sure. Take care.
We have a beautiful sister here that's been in the business of being a part of the family. Being a part of the family is the business. At Grady Grace Temple, the family is the business. It's not just a church, but we're a family, we're a community, and we're all here because of the love that we have for our late Bishop David Ellis and for our pastor, Bishop Charles Ellis. We all are here down through the years. Give us your name.
Sister Barbara Edison.
And how did you come about coming to Grady Grace Temple?
I was living in New York in 1960, and I moved to New York. I moved to Detroit, and my friend told me about a church because I had heard a broadcast coming from Puritan and Dexter, and this minister was talking about one Lord, one faith, and one baptism. And I asked Sister Essie Miller, where is that church? And she says, oh, that's my pastor. And she says, I will give you the information. I went to the church, and this preacher, everybody was shouting, running around the church, speaking with other tongues as the Spirit of the Lord gave them utterance. I joined the church, and over the years, I worked with the children's ministry. I worked with the comforters, with the pastor's aide in the kitchen, learning how to cook from Brother and Sister Jackson. And I just can't remember everything right now because,
You
pardon?
went to educational group too, right?
Yeah, part-time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And back in the day, I was sick. I became ill. And Bishop Ellis visited me in the hospital when I had surgery. And he visited me at home.
Bishop David.
Bishop David. Yes, Bishop David visited me. And then after that, the missionaries would visit me until I was able to take care of myself.
Well, we thank you so much for giving your down through the years report, and ask that God continue to bless you down through the years.
Thank you.